We're at our DoubleTree Motel north of Boston in Bedford. You can see the trees are starting to turn here, a lot more than they were down south. You see some reds, which you didn't see before. By the way, that's our rental car, that little black one that she's about ready to come to. This is the first burying ground in Woburn, Massachusetts, where my 9th great grandfather, Reverend Thomas Carter, is buried, who was the first ordained Puritan minister in the New World. And it's locked, but I just called somebody, they're going to let us in. I guess people had a habit of taking shortcuts through the cemetery, and they decided they didn't want that anymore because they have a lot of history here. Revolutionary War fighters and so forth are buried here, so soldiers, I should say. Anyway, hopefully we'll find them. So here we are. Just let in. No, the Wymans were related to the Wymans. Thomas Carter. Could be related to these Wymans here. I found a Thomas Carter, but it doesn't show that it's Reverend Thomas Carter, so it might be his son. I don't know. Surely, probably he named it. Yeah. What Wyman is it? So this is a Thomas Carter. It's just, I am thinking that if it was Reverend Carter, they would say Reverend Carter, not Mr. Carter. So I'm thinking this is more likely maybe a son of Reverend Carter, which I would be related to this gentleman, but not directly, like I would his father. Okay. So I found 2 Thomas Carters. This is one of them. Again, I doubt whether either of them is my 9th great grandfather, Reverend Carter, because I think Reverend Carter would be on the stone. Here's another Thomas Carter here. I don't know if you can read that there, but right there, Thomas Carter, and then there's Susanna Carter. There's a William Carter down below. So Carter family is here. This is the Monroe Tavern, which was used by the British as a makeshift hospital after retreating towards Boston after the Battle of Lexington and Concord in April of 1775. Unfortunately, it's not open, but at least you can see it from the outside. Monroe Tavern. I guess this would be in Lexington or near Lexington.
What?
Turn it off, please. Okay, take me one. Battle of Lexington, 1775, April the 19th. Where it all started. The shot heard around the world. And we're here right now in the National Park Visitor Center.
Call them? Do you have a number to call them?
There is a number. I actually had to ring them this morning, but I put it through PayPal.
Okay, we are across the street from Lexington Green, or they call it Battle Green. And this is the famous Buckman Tavern. It was one of the few buildings here. This wasn't a built-up city. It's on April 19th, 1775. This was the tavern where the local militia were gathering. Lexington militia. And we're going to take a tour.
And at that point in the 1830s, it was a little bit more popular to use marble on monuments than slate, so they decided, even though this was in perfectly good shape, to redo it.
Right.
Probably they assumed that the black writing on white marble would be a little more legible.
This was the original.
This is the original one, yeah.
Original memorial plaque. I'm just talking about
sorry.
video here. That's all. Sorry. I'm not totally gone, so. Some of the
We've got a
paraphernalia.
variety of
Wow.
objects in here.
So these are actually from.
Yep, so these are all the Patriot-related objects that we've got. When you get to the Monroe Tavern, you'll see the regulars, the British soldiers' objects on display.
That's close to what it looked like during the fighting there. Now that's Lexington, and that is, I believe, Concord. See the bridge there? The British didn't do as well in Concord. They had more casualties than we did. This was John Hancock's traveling desk. Look at that. Boy, I'm glad I came here. Yeah.
Hancock laptop.
Yeah. This is the Buckman Tavern kitchen. Now, the Buckman Tavern was a tavern, was a restaurant, and was kind of a boarding house also. So it's a little bit of everything. But you can see the roof. This is the real McCoy. This was where the local militia and so forth, I guess, met when they were notified that the British were coming. So there's a lot of history here. This is right across from Lexington Green, where the first fighting of the Revolutionary War took place. So you can see there were a lot of rather nervous people probably here on April 19th, 1775. It was a local hangout. We're still in the Buckman Tavern. This room they thought might have been where some of the women would have met separately to talk over gossip and so forth. So there's a meeting room at the Buckman Tavern. The gentleman that owned this tavern, Buckman, Mr. Buckman, that's his picture up there on the wall. The likes of John Hancock, who had a had a home in Lexington, although he lived most of the time in Boston. He visited here much, so he probably spent some time in this room. And they said he stored his papers about the time of the attack of Lexington. Moving over here into the hallway of the Buckman Tavern is the original door behind the glass, and right there is a hole from a musket ball from the Battle of Lexington. A lot of history here. This is the main part of Buckman Tavern where the militia on April the 19th, 1775 met here awaiting the British, who I believe were delayed is what I understand. But so this is very historic. Some young men, one young man fell asleep on a chair awaiting the British right by the fireplace over here. So boy, this is pretty awesome that we're at the very place that this American Revolution started. Here's another picture of the Battle of Lexington here that was painted by someone who visited the battle site within a week or two after the battle. Only one British regular was wounded in this first engagement, and 8 of the militia were killed. The British didn't fare so well at the next major battle, which was at Concord. They took a lot more casualties than the Americans did. And we will visit that later.
Sure, is so impressive
Buckman Tavern again.
and so refreshing to see.
Let's go over to this famous statue over here. Again. Okay, Battle Green, Lexington Green, where the Revolutionary War began, right here. can see the fall colors of the trees in the background. It's a very beautiful time to be here. There used to be a large meeting house here, but I guess it was burned in 1846 according to that plaque there. None of these houses in the city of Lexington existed. Most of them did. There was just maybe 3 or 4 buildings here around the green in 1775. Beautiful, beautiful grass. It's just it was really impressive, that Buckman Tavern, I'll tell you. Let's go see the guide here, dressed up in revolutionary garb. That monument up there on the little hill is the site where some of the casualties, colonial casualties on the Battle of Lexington are buried still.
So after the war in 1789, George Washington
The commander,
came to Monroe
Captain
Tavern and
Parker,
stayed overnight
this is
there.
his
Go to
famous
Monroe
line,
Tavern
"Stay
today.
with the-
Everything that he touched has been preserved as well as
Don't
the
fire,
stay
must
there.
fire the corn."
Also, that monument right there was erected in 1799 in memory of the 8 men that died on a grave, but only 7 of them are buried underneath there. The one man that's not buried there is the man who died from the nearby town of Woburn. He is actually buried in a small town. All 7 of those men buried there were all from Lexington. Also, if you're interested, there's an old burial ground for that church parking lot on the left-hand side. That church is currently under renovation, where many Revolutionary War veterans are buried. One of the veterans buried there is Captain John Parker. He died 3 months after the war, after the Battle of Concord, Lexington, but he did not die during the war. He actually died of TB at age 46. Yeah. Any questions, anyone? Little insight about Paul Revere, he actually was a French Huguenot, which means French Protestant, and his name in French is pronounced Renoir. Excuse me. And right here is a picture of Paul Revere's home. His home is the oldest building in the city of Boston.
Right.
Built in 1680. The first home Paul Revere had arrived at when he came here on midnight of April 19th of 1775 was the Clark Hancock House. Clark Hancock House is right down that street.
Right.
It's actually within walking distance of the Battle Green, a 6 to 7 minute walk if you're interested. Do the guess that night where Samuel Adams and John Hancock, they were both hiding out there because they had warrants out for the rest in Boston. The belfry rang out at 12:30 at night right after Paul Revere left. And the day after, Samuel Adams and John Hancock actually went in hiding at a different home in Bill Ricker, Massachusetts on the 20th of April. McCarran, the leader of the British Army, said, "Drop your weapons and disperse. Lay your arms down or you're all dead man." Around that time, as words have been exchanged, myth and legend is a man named Solomon Brown was hiding out behind a stone wall around the Buckman Tavern when his gun was fired up in the air. That shot heard around the world was enough for the British to open fire on the Americans, which they did, right where this flagpole now stands. And when Captain John Parker realized how greatly outnumbered he was, 77 to 700, he actually told his men to take cover and to retreat. But sadly, when the smoke had cleared, 8 Americans had died on the green, 10 Americans were wounded. There were no British casualties at all. Only 1 British officer gets wounded. And we'll stop at this famous spot where we stood at the crack of dawn.
So that would have been where the militia was?
Yeah. The first person that actually was hit and wounded was a man named Prince Estabrook. He was a slave trying to get his freedom papers. And to tell you a little bit about some of the other casualties. One of the casualties was a man from the nearby town of Woburn who died in the street here. Another man named Jonathan Harrington got mortally wounded on the grate. Managed to make it to the front steps of his home where he died in front of his wife. Yep, you all can join. And another man that also died on the green was a cousin of Captain John Parker. 25% of the men that stood here that morning were related to Captain John Parker. The battle lasted for about 8 minutes. And after that, that was when the British then began their march up to Concord, which was the original plan. Go to Concord, to the North Bridge, and siege weapons up at the depot. They arrived there around 7 a.m. but much to their disappointment, all the weapons had been moved to various different locations throughout the area. Around 9 a.m., 400 militiamen and Minutemen from all these surrounding towns here had gathered up at the North Bridge. At 9:30 a.m. that same day, we had a battle with the British at the North Bridge. And at the North Bridge, the first British casualty fell. 3 British were killed, 9 British were wounded, along with 2 Americans killed, and 4 Americans wounded. And one of the Americans that was actually killed at the North Bridge was actually Isaac Davis, who was one of the leaders and the founders of the Minutemen. He actually received a bullet to the heart and died instantly. Also at the North Bridge, we had proved to the British that we had a great army. And that's when the British then began their retreat back to Boston, where they came across heavy gunfire all along the way here, known as the Minuteman Trail. The next battle after the North Bridge took place at Merriam's Corner in Concord. By then it was guerrilla warfare, and our militia had rose to 1,100 men, and there were many casualties as well at Merriam's Corner in Concord. Then the next battle after that took place at Bloody Angle and Lincoln. Lincoln's between Concord and Lexington. What happened at Bloody Angles? We set a fire that kind of backfired on us because there was many casualties as well at Bloody Angle and Lincoln, but more British than American. Then the next battle after that took place on the Lexington-Lincoln line called Parker's Revenge, where Captain John Parker over there had another battle with the British on the Lexington-Lincoln line. Parker's Revenge is right behind the Minuteman Visitor Center. Then the next battle after that took place at Fisk Hill and Lexington. Fisk Hill is just before the Minuteman Visitor Center. Right after the battle of Fisk Hill, a couple of our soldiers got treated for the wounds right across the street at the Buckman Tavern, where one of them died 3 days later of his wounds. And around that same time at Monroe Tavern, just a mile and a half down the street here, the British set up headquarters for an hour there to treat their wounded. Also at the Monroe Tavern, one of our local militiamen named John Raymond, a cripple, was trying to escape and was shot and killed outside the Monroe Tavern as well.
So this is where 7 of the 8 militia casualties of the Battle of Lexington are interred on this hill here. And this is a tombstone that commemorates this. Robert Monroe, Jonas Parker, Samuel Hadley, Jonathan Harrington Jr., I guess, Isaac Muzzy, Caleb Harrington, John Brown. Who knows, perhaps we're related to some of these. We're going to go across the street to the old church here, cemetery, and in that cemetery is where the captain who led the militia at the Battle of Lexington is buried. His name is John Parker, and he was actually the statue that we saw as you're entering the common here, or the Lexington Green, if you will. The commander of the militia, John Parker, who died a few months later of tuberculosis, I guess, is buried in the cemetery just a block or two off the Lexington Green. So we're trying to find where his stone is. You would think it would be something pretty substantial, but
The more monuments over there. Oh wow, over here. Probably over there, guys.
yeah. Look at all these old stones here. All these were people just like you or I. Here's the grave of a British soldier who died at the Battle of Lexington, died at Buckman Tavern, right where we just visited. Okay, there's the grave of John Parker, commander of the militia at Lexington Green. Right there. This is the Hancock Clark parsonage, where John Hancock and Samuel Adams were in April 1775 and were warned at this very house by Paul Revere that the British were on their way. That Paul Revere came through that very door right there. This is Concord, of Concord at Lexington. This is the town of Concord. We're going to get something to eat and go over to the Old North Bridge. the colors coming up here were just really bright, so we're really thinking it's going to be pretty spectacular later on. I'm not even. They were in Concord, Massachusetts. She had the seafood stew. Look at all the mussels there. Starting
Triani's real good with his detail. So
Battle of Concord. So this basically, when you say the Battle of Concord, it was the North Bridge, pretty much.
yeah, and by battle it's.
Here's the Old North Bridge, where the Battle of Concord took place. There's the famous Minuteman statue. It's on savings bonds and whatnot. This was put up in 1875 on our 100th anniversary of the Battle of Concord. And I'll take the front, and the only problem is I'll be looking at the sun a little bit. So he's they put him here because he held the North Bridge. The British were coming from the other side. The Old North Bridge. A lot of carnage happening along here. Old North Bridge. Here's a grave of a British soldier who perished on this bridge. There's a monument at the Old North Bridge. It was erected in 1836. Lots of nice, you can see the fall colors. The Old North Bridge, where the Battle of Concord took place.